Welcome to the workshop on finding external funding for your RISCA, or Research, Scholarship, and Creative Activity. This is the third in a four-part series of workshops being held this fall semester on grant writing. So let me just give you a sense of what we're going to do this afternoon in the workshop. We'll have some introductions. We'd love to hear who you are, and then we want to introduce ourselves and the roles we play in the process of grant writing here at the campus. We want to introduce to you some of the primary funders of RISCA work at San Jose State and tell you about different pathways for finding out who might be a good funder for your RISCA work. One of the main strategies that will give you the most flexibility and specificity is doing your own searches. So we'll introduce you to a couple of tools we have on campus for you to do that. And then we have some guidelines for using those tools that we'll show you. And then that'll probably take about an hour, and then we'll have some workshop time. And we really encourage you to stick around for that and make use of this window of time that you and we have created together that is a space in your week for you to do some of this work. So we encourage you to stay for that. We're all going to stick around and be here to help you if you get stuck in using any of these tools. And then we'll come back together at 1:45 just to sum up and talk about next steps and talk about a potential benefit to you if you do stay for the workshop and come up with some funders to get some feedback on the fit of those funders with your RISCA idea. Okay. Raj, that's what I'm missing on my list. So I'm Amy Tentradi. I'm a professor in the School of Social Work, and I serve as Associate Dean for Research for the College of Applied Science and Arts. And we have a great group here of very knowledgeable people who are going to be talking us through this information. So I'll go ahead and start with Silke. Can you just...
Hi, I'm Silke Higgins. I'm from over at the SJSU Library. I'm currently the liaison librarian for anthropology, justice studies, and social work. But I'm also helping generally with research, and I was very happy that I was selected to help out from going forward with pivot, funding, being kind of like a liaison between the library and the faculty for all things funding. So thank you for having me today.
Hi, I'm Gilles Muller, the Associate Dean of Research from the Office of Research.
Hi, I'm Raj Prasad. I'm the Director for Office of Sponsored Programs at the Research Foundation, and we're here to help you with your full life cycle proposal to grants management for state, local, and federal agencies.
Carmina Som from the Research Foundation. I work for the Information Services Department. A huge part of what we do is find funders for you guys, for faculty and staff, and we're glad to be here.
Michelle Smith, Corporate and Foundation Relations Officer at the Tower Foundation, and the Tower Foundation is focused on philanthropic contributions to the university.
Okay, and hopefully most, if not all of these folks can stay during the workshop to answer your questions. Okay, so those of you who have been attending this series will find this slide familiar. We're showing it at every workshop just to give you a sense of the whole life cycle involved in grantsmanship and where these workshops sort of fit in on that cycle. So generating your idea is number one, and we had a workshop on getting your ideas down on paper. Finding funding is number two. It's actually the third in our series of workshops, but that's where we are now. And you can see we're just right now targeting the beginning points in this life cycle. And then the third stage is developing and submitting your proposal. Our second workshop was on writing a budget, which is part of that. And our last workshop, held later this month, I believe, is on writing the narrative for a grant proposal. Raj, can I ask you to step in and talk about 4, 5, 6, and 7?
Sure. So award negotiation is once we know we're going to be funded. It's working with the sponsor to negotiate the most favorable terms for the university and for all of you, making sure we're able to meet the requirements. If it's federal, they may flow down terms and conditions. There may be financial conflict of interest. There may be guidelines with export control, IP considerations. There may be human subjects, etc. So there's a whole negotiation process that goes on there before the award is actually accepted on your behalf. The award setup, again, we would be working with you to set up the account so you can have access to your fund, introducing you to the HR department, purchasing department, accounting department to facilitate hiring of staff. Maybe you need to get a job description done or posting a position, or you need to purchase something right away. So getting purchase orders, etc., service agreements together, any independent contractor agreements together. And then we get into the stage of managing your award. So it could be a 6-month award, it could be 12 months, it could be a multi-year award. And on those, just working with you through that entire process where the accounting will come into play, the HR department will come into play, procurement will come into play, and also working with your financial analyst on the post-award side to help you manage the funds, to give you an accounting of your balance, what you're projected to end out with, etc. And then we get into closeout of your award. So typically that happens 90 days before the actual grant is supposed to end, working with you guys to make sure the financial reports are accurate so that can be submitted to the sponsor. If there's any technical reports, if there's any declarations of inventions, making sure all of that is submitted, and any other final or progress reports that are required. Making sure that happens, and if you have staff, that will transition to other projects, working with HR to making sure those folks get transferred to different projects. And if that's not the case, making sure you're working with HR to give at least 60-day notices to staff if their employment is going to end because the project is ending. So that, in a nutshell, would be the whole life cycle of the project.
So any of you that have been to our 2 earlier workshops or who were listening really, really carefully during the introductions, this is a little quiz. We have 2 auxiliaries on campus that assist our faculty with grant submission, Tower Foundation and Research Foundation. Who knows when you use one or the other?
You use the Research Foundation for federal funding, such as NSF grants. You use the Tower Foundation for philanthropic donations to the university. So generally private companies giving money for your project.
So it's public money or private money, essentially. I got a phone call from a faculty member in CASA who was calling me asking which one to use and didn't want to take any action until he knew which one to use. But in reality, you can contact a program manager at either auxiliary if you aren't sure, and they will investigate and find out if theirs is the right one, and if not, they'll simply say, nope, this goes over to Tower, you need to contact Michelle or Paul or whatever. So it's not really a big deal. It's good to understand there's 2 different ones, that one does public and one does private, but it's also not a big deal if you reach out to the wrong one. And one thing you can always do if you really want to find out before you reach out is connect with Gilles Muller, who's the Associate Dean for Research for the university, and he can help you figure out where's the right place to go. Okay, so now we're going to talk about some different opportunities for grant funding, and we're going to start with a brief introduction to foundations and corporations from Michelle Smith.
And I'm going to make some comments, but I think I'm actually going to save some of what I plan to share today until after we have the demonstration of a database tool a little bit later. So I'm going to save some of my comments for that because I think they'll make a little more sense for everyone. Again, I'm Michelle. I'm with the foundation, the Tower Foundation, and it's the foundation that handles philanthropic gifts. Good answer. Oftentimes it's foundations, private foundations that we're working with, and sometimes it's corporate foundations. There's another slide on this. So some examples of who you would work with if you were working with a Tower Foundation on different funding could be the California Wellness Foundation, Correct Foundation, some examples of local foundations up here. National funders that we work with regularly, the ACS, that's the Petroleum Research Fund that they have for the American Chemical Society, Alzheimer's Association. So it's the word foundation is often in there, but that does not always indicate that it's a foundation. There are some federal funding that have that word in their name, but if it's private funding, that tends to be who we work with. And Silicon Valley Community Foundation actually is a big name in locally, so that is another name you may come across.
What is the community foundation versus, say, a local foundation?
So there are somewhere, depending on how you count them, there are 120,000 to 200,000 private foundations in the country. It kind of depends on how you categorize them. Foundation is often used to talk about a family foundation. So it could be the Sobrato Family Foundation, for example. The Sobrato family put money into a foundation and they distribute it according to however the family is most interested in supporting the community. So that would be an example of a family foundation that's sort of grown into a larger one. The Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation has family name in it, that the money ultimately came from the Moore family. The Community Foundation sort of wears two hats. They have their own money, and they do RFPs, requests for proposals, to apply to get their money, but they also have community money that other people have invested with them into donor advised funds. You can't pursue that money. That's invitation only. But it's there, and that's for the Silicon Valley Community Foundation in particular. They're huge. They're massive, dollar amount wise, but it's not money that we can pursue necessarily. So community foundations have money from other sources that are basically invested in them, and they are sort of the bank, as well as their own money. And then there are family foundations, and then some of these other foundations that were created for different reasons. The Health Trust is a good example. The Health Trust is a local funder here in Santa Clara and San Benito counties, and it was formed from money that came from the sale of some hospitals. And so it was put together in a foundation and they distribute it. So there's different ways that the money comes about, but that gives you a sense of what those look like and why the community foundations are different. And here we have a sampling, very small, but a sampling of some of the private grants that people on campus have received. Some from the Ford Foundation, for Justice Studies, for example, and Alzheimer's Foundation funded some public health activities. Keck has given some large amounts of money in different areas, including chemistry. So there's a pretty broad range of what, if you can think of it, there's some foundation that probably funds a particular project. It's just a matter of figuring out who funds what and can we pursue that funding.
And just, I'm sure you all can't read this, but the budgets for these awards vary from $25,000 to over $1 million, from 1-year grants to 5-year grants, so it's a lot of variation.
And I will say that a lot of times, if you sat down and looked at all the private foundations and what the size of the grants that they give compared to federal awards, they tend to be much smaller. 25,000, 50,000, 75,000, 100,000 is very common, whereas those would be considered pretty small for anything that's at the federal level. So they are often smaller, and for some people that's actually a better fit because their project isn't going to be $1 million over 3 years. It's going to be release time for a year for a project. So.
Thanks. And so Raj is going to talk a little bit now about opportunities for public funding.
So for public funding, some of the bigger names out there would be with the federal government, NIH, NSF, you might have NASA, you might have Department of Defense. And typically with these, the funding ranges. With NIH as an example, you can have an RO3 mechanism, typically $50,000 in direct costs is what they'll award, to an R21, where you can get up to $275,000 over 2 years. The beauty of those type of grants would be it's preliminary. You don't have much data to go with it. It's an exploratory grant, and then you get into your typical R01s If it's modular, you're going up to 500K direct costs without a detailed budget. And if it's more than 500,000, it's a detailed budget that's required on all of those. And then we're getting into one area that I want to say overlaps with private, with some of the companies, is if it's a small business that's going after an SBIR or STTR. So with those, with these small companies, what they're trying to do is partner with universities or research institute. And what happens is about 67% of the funds that come in are for the company to do their whatever development they're doing, and 33% comes to the university or research institute to do the work. And with those, it's flow down of all the federal terms and conditions. So for those, Research Foundation would be helping you get the proposal submitted to the company, and they in turn would be submitting to the federal agency. The same also would apply with state and local and agencies. But my advice would be with federal, you have more flexibility in terms of rebudgeting, especially if you're under expanded authorities. You can rebudget funding up to 25% as long as the scope of work doesn't change. But with some of the state and the local governments, like the city or the county, they're very restrictive. They track things to the dollar amount. So there's less rebudgeting authority with those. In terms of funding, the research, yes.
So you started this whole paragraph with a couple acronyms that
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with.
Sure.
So the companies submitting grants in partnership with us.
Yes.
And you mentioned a couple different acronyms.
SBIR is Small Business Innovative Research Grants. So there's usually a phase 1 and a phase 2. On those, phase 1 is typically 100,000, and I've seen phase 2 go up to $500,000 to $750,000. And then there's also Small Business Technology Transfer grants as well, and that's more geared towards commercialization of some IP. So those are all vehicles that are available for, and usually these would be with small companies that want to partner with universities.
Thank you.
No problem. In terms of Research Foundation and in terms of the public funding, so at any point in time, we typically have between 50 to 60 million in public monies that we're managing at one time. As of the last fiscal year, we managed about 56 million in federal, state, and local funding on behalf of the university, and we also submit about 125 million in proposals. And so, our success rate is about 40-some%. And in terms of the last, 4 years, we've managed about 205 million. Our biggest funders per se are fit into three categories: Moss Landing Marine Lab, NASA Human Factors, and then also main campus. It's into three pots in terms of the federal and state and local funding that we're managing. So on average, you could say about 52 million over 3.5 years, where about 2.5 million is what we've managed on behalf of the university.
And this just shows that depending what discipline you're in and what college you're in, you're going to have really different opportunities for funding and different cultures about how important grant writing is and whether it's really a part of your scholarly work or not. And so you can see that science brings in the lion's share of research dollars in terms of grant writing, and social science with NASA Human Factors also brings in a lot. The rest of us bring in somewhat less, but we're hoping to see if we can bring those columns up higher. Okay, so now we're going to talk about how can you find funding for your project. When I put the slide together, I put this image on the back for a reason. The next slide will continue the bottom part of the triangle. There's different sort of strategies and pathways to use to find funding, and they have different pros and cons. So, one reality is that you have a lot of teaching to do, you've got a lot of other responsibilities, you don't have a ton of time as a faculty member. So you could use a strategy that takes a little bit less time and uses expertise of others, or algorithms or something to help you find funding, and that's good because it won't take as much time and you might get things right through your inbox, and we'll tell you how to do that. Some of the cons is that's a little generic and it might not find you just the right fit for your project. So as we talk through the different ways to find funding, we're going to go from more general to more less labor intensive to more labor intensive, more general to more specific. So first, one obvious one is just to use your colleagues and your contacts. If you know people that have gotten grants, ask them who funded them, especially if they do similar work, and how did they find out about it. If you are familiar with a body of literature in the area in which you want to do a study, check out those articles. If they've been funded, they'll tell you who the funders are on those, and you can. That's a good way to get started. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to Carmina, and if you could come stand over here so you're kind of close to the microphone. And
So as I said, mentioned earlier, I work for the Information Services Department. A big task that we have are funding alerts. I'm not sure how many of you are signed up for our funding alerts.
let's see a show of hands. How many people are signed up for the Research Foundation funding alerts? Oh, okay. All right. About a fifth. We'll have an opportunity for you to sign up.
So we have this form. We used to, it kind of describes our keyword list. We found that sometimes faculty will get bombarded with funding alert emails that doesn't really relate to their research. So we added a little section where they're able to include a brief description of their research interests. And with that, we do individualized funding searches using the keywords you provided along with a brief description. We do our own research, Brenda and I, who's not here today. We also submitted to a place called Grants Resource Center, which I will go into later. Both are, they do a great job finding opportunities. A lot of them are private, but most of them, it's a mixed bag. So depending on what you want to pursue, it's there. Also, so customized searches. We've been getting a lot of contacts from faculty with, they would kind of call us and give us their idea of what they want to pursue, and it's really helpful for us to get a snapshot of the budget, what they want to receive, whether it's federal, local, state. It will also help us if oftentimes faculty will come with an idea and then they don't know who to talk to as far as our OSP managers. We have a lot of managers who expertise from different colleges. So we also connect them to our managers. They could also help.
So just to reiterate that she talked about two different strategies. One is the keyword alert system. So what you do is you look through a list of keywords, you find the ones that sort of match up with your research interests, and you fill out that form and send it to them. And then they will plug you into a system in which any grant opportunity that is associated with those keywords will be sent to your inbox. And you'll get an email every time there's a relevant opportunity. So that's great. It's very easy to do. You can do it in 5 minutes here, and then you're going to get these opportunities in your email inbox. One thing to note about them is sometimes they're going to be too broad or not quite right because they're just using this simple keyword match. And the other thing is that sometimes the due date for the submission will be very, very soon, like in 2 weeks, and there's no way you're going to put together a competitive proposal in 2 weeks, right? But oftentimes, the grant opportunities are cyclical. So they might have quarterly sort of submission windows. So yes, you're not going to do this submission window, but maybe the next one or the following one. So it's good to just be aware of what the opportunities are that can arise. 1 sec, okay? So that's one, that's the keyword alert. And then the second thing that Carmina talked about is a specialized search, where somebody else will search on your behalf. But they have to know something about what it is that you want to fund. So you have to put together some kind of project summary. So if you came to our first workshop, hopefully you did that. You put together a one-page proposal summary that outlined what you wanted to do and gave a very rough sense of what kind of cost you were looking at and what time frame. Then you send that to Carmina and or Brenda at the Research Foundation, and they will do a search for you or get the GRC folks to do a search for you. And they will bring to your inbox in a week or so maybe 10 opportunities that might be a good fit for you. A couple of caveats on this strategy. They don't always have the resources to be able to do it because they're a very small piece of the Research Foundation, and it could just be that they're not able to take this on for you. Secondly, they don't know the nuances of your project the way that you do. So they might identify something and think it's a fit, but actually it won't be. Or conversely, they might miss something that in fact would have been a good fit because they don't know the full story of your project the way that you do. Do you still have a question, Catherine?
I did. It's in regards to that 2-week window. And I know that with the research that I do, there is that terrible 2-week window, and then 6 months later there'll be something similar, but not quite what. And the question is, who has the time to pull that together? I mean, do people know? How do you get into the know that this is going to come up?
Next slide. You have an answer to that, Gilles?
Yeah.
Oh.
So I can answer a little this question. In fact, the way that you can know in advance is that you can do it on your own to do some preliminary searches. Because by doing that, you will know if something will come up. Because often the funders, they have cycles, as Amy said earlier. It's either a few times per year or only once per year, but it will come back most of the time. So one way is that before you use those resources where someone can do some search for you, you can also do a little on your own. And the advantage of doing that, yes, it takes some of your time, but the advantage, you have the expertise and you know exactly what you are looking for. And if you have some of the website that you can use for that, this is something that would be useful. And I would recommend and encourage all of you that we will give you some examples of websites that you can use, and they will give you some idea. And after, we will also develop another search tool by Silke or to get more information. And before I continue, I think there is a question.
So some funding agencies tell you, the grants administrators, and say, oh, you should get in touch with these people.
Yes.
And are those people allowed to tell you what's coming up, or are they only allowed to tell you what's already published?
So usually it depends. If they know that something will come up and it's sure, they can mention it. But if they are not sure, they may not talk about it. But what's important, and that's also a good point, is that when you have done a search, for instance, and you have found a program, there will be always a program manager or the program officer mentioned. And the first thing that you should do when you have an idea of a project, if you have not more than a page, a brief description of what you want to do, contact the program officer, send an email, introduce yourself, and explain what you are looking for, and in fact to get some feedback about is this a good fit for this program or not. And then to request to have a phone conversation with this program officer.
Sorry, you request to do it?
A phone conversation.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
And in fact, by doing that, either the person will tell you, yes, it's a good fit, or maybe it's not a good fit, but maybe you could submit it to another of our programs. The second advantage of being in contact with the program officer is that you want to start a dialogue with this person. Because this is the person that's very important, because this person may be able to advocate for you when your proposal will be reviewed and will have maybe the final decision if you will be funded or not. So it's always good to know who the program officer is. And usually they are available to talk to you. You just contact them. Be prepared when you have the phone conversation, because often you just have 15 minutes or 30 minutes because they are also busy. but that's something that you can do. And in this case, often they can also provide you information by phone that they won't put in an email. So that's the other reason why you want to talk to them. So
Can I make a comment
Yeah.
on this point? And this is one of the places where public funding is a different animal from private funding. With the private funding, it is actually not best to directly be in touch with the foundation as soon as you think you might have an idea. And there are a couple of reasons for that. From the private foundation's perspective, we are San Jose State. And if they already sent us a check for the most recent grant last week and you call, they will be confused why San Jose State doesn't know that they just mailed us a check. And so that's why with the private funders, we always ask people to at least contact the Tower Foundation just to make sure, are we in the middle of a grant? Did we just get a grant? Did we meet with them yesterday morning? And they'll be really confused why they're being contacted by someone else. And then we can, most of the time we can say we aren't in in contact with them, we aren't in the middle of a grant with them, and we can give you some recommendations, or we can say, actually, here's the process that they've asked us to use, because again, from their perspective, we are one entity. We are the university, and so that's one of the few times where it's sort of a little bit of a different process, where you don't have the advantage of the program officer that you do with the federal opportunities.
but they can do it on your behalf.
We can help, or we can say yes. They actually do like you to fill out something on their form, or no, please hold off, and we'll help you get in touch with them.
Okay, so now an example of a website that you can use. For instance, if you are interested in looking at some potential funders in California, you have the ca.gov website, and I know that you have all the slides, or if you don't have them, you can request them and we will provide you. So this is one example where you can get information about, for instance, the Department of Water Resources and others if you are looking for something in the state of California. And in this case, after, when you go to the different potential funders, you can get information about calls or announcement of funding that they may have. When we talk about sponsors websites, and the main sponsors, as it has been mentioned earlier, often we talk about NIH, NSF. Those are websites, and this is, you have the example of the NIH. This website is very useful for different reasons. Yes, first, as we are talking about, you can find opportunities for you. But the second is, let's say you found a program that would fit your RISCA interest. By looking there with this website on NIH, you can look in this program who has been funded for similar activities that you may want to develop. And it will also give you some ideas what people have submitted, because you can see the abstract of each program that has been funded through this program. And that's another way to use those tools, is that you know what people have been funded for, what they are doing, and who they are, because you will get the name of the PI, the university, etc. So even sometimes if you are looking for collaborators, that could be an opportunity to find out who is in the same area than you. The other information that you can also get, you will get the amount of dollars awarded to each grant. And this is also a tool that you can use, because sometimes you are not sure how much can be my budget for 1 year or several years for a grant. If you look in the program you may want to apply, what has been funded, you will have a good idea what is possible or not, because you don't want to be much higher than what they usually fund or too low, because in this case I don't think reviewers will see your proposal as it has been well done, that you have not done your literature review before submitting. So that's why those are ways that you can do that. The other one, well, NSF, by the way, is also doing the same. You can use the NSF website like NIH and do the same if you are looking for NSF. That's another one where this is not just for NIH or NSF, but from this one, the grants.gov, you can get funding opportunities from different agencies. So in fact, you can go to look at different federal agencies, for instance, and you can get all of this information. And again, it's the same way. You can do your search by keywords or some PIs, universities, to see what has been done. So this is something, as I said at the beginning, it may take some of your time, but I encourage you to do it because you have the expertise. Nobody else has the expertise that you have, so that's why you have a better idea. And once you figure out that, oh, something should be of your interest, you can contact us, either me at the Office of Research or directly the Research Foundation or the Tower Foundation, and we will work with you for all the questions you may have. And that's my part.
Okay, so we've talked about the keywords, signing up, the specialized searches that the Research Foundation will do for you, and then using sponsors' websites to find opportunities. But what we're going to focus on now is if you don't have any idea who might be a good funder for you, you're not sure if NIH is right or whatever, and you just want to consider every possible opportunity. We have 2 tools on campus that you can use to search for a funder. The first one is the Grants Resource Center. And these are databases that the university pays for a subscription to. So it gives us access to this database that holds all this information about these different funders. And I think, Carmina, are you going to walk us through this one?
So for the GRC, you would contact Information Services for the SJSU's credentials, or the handout will have the login and password. It's universal for all faculty and staff. Once you get in, you're able to access all the funding resources. A huge tool that we use at Research Foundation is the grant search, and you're able to do it yourself too. It's pretty simple. It's plugging in academic category, and then the deadline months. If you want to look at deadlines that are in March or April to give you time to kind of develop your proposal. What's good about the GRC is that they have a lot of cyclical proposals, and I've seen as far as, I think I've seen a deadline that goes as far as next December 2017. So it kind of gives you enough time to think about if you want to do this, if you want to pursue it, what you need to go through with it. And also with GRC, you can contact them if you have any questions, if you do not want, or if you're not comfortable with talking to the program manager of a specific funding opportunity, you could contact them. They'll do it for you, just in case. So this is a website. So you would just go to log in up on the right-hand corner. And I've only had to log in once from my desktop, and after that you should be okay. For some reason it just remembers you logged in. So the username is SJSU, lowercase. Password is awards, all lowercase. Log in. And then you would go to the grant search tab. And then as you can see, you can scroll down, there's different categories depending on your college or discipline. And under each category, there's a subject. For instance, education would have different subjects. And you would click. You could add more than one. And by default, the selection of OR is always selected. So let's say we do early education, you add that. For example, what we commonly look for is curriculum materials development for faculty. Also, if you know a specific sponsor, you could go ahead and select it, but we usually just leave it. That way you could get a variety. And the deadline months, like I've mentioned, you could leave it as is, or you could select. I usually leave it as is so you can get more of a broader result search. And then I'll go back to the keyword search in a minute.
And we have a handout, so this is a tool that you're going to want to use during the workshop portion. We have a handout that walks you through these steps.
And then you would go ahead and click Start Search. And then, so there's 8 matches. So by default, it'll check mark, it'll select all. But if you want to view a specific one, you would just hit clear all, and then click on the hyperlink. Let's say we want to look at this. And oftentimes with GRC, the deadline has passed, but we've contacted them, and they keep it on the list because they believe that next year will happen again. So if you click on this, you can go ahead and see a synopsis of the opportunity, and it also provides a link to the sponsor guideline. So another way that we use this search is to, let me go back, is to just leave the entire thing the way it is and go down to the keyword search field. And if you're looking at cybersecurity, you can just go ahead and type it in here, and it'll provide you a list of cybersecurity related funding opportunities. And you could also sort by sponsor, program title, GRC number. I'm currently not sure what that is, but I'll look into that, and deadline. That's a grant search in a nutshell.
Okay. So that's one tool. And then we have a brand new alternative that has just been introduced.
In October, it's brand new.
So-
It's a couple weeks old.
And it is supposed to have a lot of strengths to be a very
Yes.
good tool.
Yes, it is very, very strong, very versatile. Has a bit of a learning curve, but provides a lot of opportunities beyond just the grant searches. So I would need the internet as well for a quick demo. The reason why I want to give a quick demo about this is not so much about how to search. I've made a handout also that will show you where to find information, how to search. Most of them are actually YouTube videos, really, really well done from ProQuest. But to show you how to get to the database, because this is one of the databases that is housed by the library, and library databases, they tend to be numerous, on average 450, and they also hide between those firewalls. So I just want to briefly show you how to get to it. Easiest way to get to the library is to Google it. Library. And when you are on the home page of the library, and the right-hand corner under quick links, you will see articles and databases. You click that link, and on the next page, you will be given a listing A to Z databases. Yes, you could pick the letter P and work your way down, but the easiest way is to just type in next to where it says databases, the word pivot. And this is great because pivot is the only one we have by that name. And you will see a brief description of the database as well as the live link that will lead you to the database. When you're on campus, you should be fine if you're using the SJSU Premier network to sign in. If you're off campus, doing it anywhere else, you would need to use your Tower ID and a 4-digit PIN to access. The same as any of our other databases, there is no difference essentially. What I want to point out to you before I even click to the database is something really important. I'm glad they put it right there. A link to the Pivot LibGuide, which is kind of like a research guide. Let me really quickly show you what this looks like. It's a little informational guide that has in writing a lot of tips and tricks, some handouts, a getting started guide on how to use Pivot. But it also has a link right here to the videos, which is the YouTube channel for Pivot. They truly made their entire YouTube channel. Whoops. And there are a lot of videos for all the way from getting started to getting in-depth information, how to do detailed researches. And I watched a lot of them. I was already warned. I had a webinar the other day. Not all of them are 100% updated. They are doing this right now, but the core information is still correct, valid, and up to date. So I checked. I spent a little time watching YouTube. That was for a good case. So once you get to Pivot, the database itself, This is the screen you will see. How many of you, if anyone has, by any chance, come across Pivot in a different institution or looked at it? Okay, so then it will be probably for everyone, instead of logging in, the process of signing up. Here are a couple things to consider. Your name, first name, last name, institutional email. You will make a password. You will be able to select the institution from the list. What happens next is they will send you an email to your SJSU email. You must use your SJSU email. That is now a thing they require to confirm the login process. Thereafter, you will be able to log in into Pivot. But once again, they will ask you for the information of username and password. And here was my first stumbling block. I wanted to give myself a different username. Just Silke Higgins instead of my email address, the full thing they pre-showed to me. They let me do it, but when I hit enter, it said, well, you need to now utilize your SJSU email. I said, why didn't you tell me this right up front? So if you're trying to change it to a different username, it will not be successful. Please just leave it at the first login screen the way it is. And then you will be able to log in. Essentially, it will look like. Yes?
So so username to log into Pivot is our faculty ID or our email on campus?
The email on campus. Just like I do it here, I'm logging myself in now with Silke Higgins, silke.higgins@sjsu.edu. But then I'm using a password that I was able to set for myself.
So you can come up with your own password though, got it?
That's a good question. Thank you. Yes. Own password is perfect, but username is not changeable. Okay, so, and then you will have options on the upper right hand side. When you first log in, you will see a lot of announcements that will give you a little guidance on what is happening. But what is important here is your profile under your name. When you first log in, you will not see your profile. You will see a link that no longer exists because I already did it. It will say claim your profile. When you click on that, it will look through a database and will try to find a match. And for me, it was fairly easy. I'm the only person with that first name, last name combination and the institution. So it picked my profile right away. I said, yes, this is me. And then you go to the whole process again. They will send you an email and you have to confirm that this is your profile. I'm saying this, I'm pointing this out because I've heard from a couple faculty, they came from a different institution. And they were, and Gilles, yeah, I think it happened to you,
it
right?
happened to me, yes.
Can you briefly explain your experience so
Yes.
that I don't speak for third parties? Because this is important.
Yeah, so what happened is that when I wanted to claim my profile, so they gave me different names, and I have seen one, mine, and I wanted to claim it, and I couldn't. And in fact, I didn't have access because I needed to, so I contacted them, but what was good, I sent them an email, and I think 10 minutes later, they contacted me and they said, oh, it's normal that you cannot claim it because we have an old profile from another university where you were. So this could happen depending where you were and if they had access to Pivot. Even if you didn't use it, you may have some link to it. So you just have to contact them and they take care of it. So don't be surprised by that. Because for me, I was surprised because the profiles I wanted to claim was for San Jose State, but it was affiliated with another university. And I didn't do anything there, but so that's why this is the thing that could happen, and this is what Silke was mentioning.
So, oh yeah, this question.
Quick question. When you logged in, when you actually accessed Pivot through SJ Library, it goes through live access, .sjsu, etc.
Right.
You know, it's not happening for me at least, even though I'm on campus. So I'm just wondering, all I'm getting is pivot.cos.com. And then even if I try access using institutional credentials, SJSU is not on the list.
Let's look at that
Yeah.
in a moment because
Yeah, no
I
problem.
heard
I
a
just-
case about that. So this is just what I briefly wanted to tell you about. The other things are very self-explanatory. They're all in the LibGuides. We can work on this maybe later as we go through. And the only thing there's to do here is the home page where I would start. Basic fundings are up here, but I'm now going to turn it over to Michelle, who will talk a little bit more about private funding, searches for private funding via Pivot.
Maybe can I just say one thing? One thing before we continue. So today we just wanted to introduce you to a Pivot, but if you are interested in getting more information in terms of how to use it or to do some searches, let us know. Either we can do it for individuals, or if you want that a presentation to a department or a college, let us know. And I know Silke and I and others will be pleased to do so and see what are your needs and to present it in front of a department or colleagues, etc. Because we know that this is something that you will see in the near future. Once you use it, can be very useful for whatever your needs are in terms of finding funders.
And when I was getting ready for today, I logged in expecting to find our other database, and it was gone. And I panicked. Like, what happened? And then was introduced to Pivot and had a chance to sort of go into it and search as if I were looking for foundation funding. And I wanted to point out a couple of other differences, especially if anyone has used Foundation Directory Online or some of the other ones, because I think Pivot has the potential to really offer some nice resources, but there are a couple of significant differences that we commonly use when we're looking for foundation funding. So I just wanted to kind of point some of those out. It's a growing company. Their database right now does not include a lot of the local funders, I found. I put in a number of funders that are currently funding San Jose State, and some of them are missing. And I think that'll be resolved fairly quickly, but right now, this is a tool in your tool belt for looking for funding. I wouldn't say for foundation funders that this is going to be the only place you go. And actually, the very first item on your triangle, on the triangle that we looked at with contacts, I think kind of related to that in terms of good places for foundation funding searches is really you. And this was brought up before. You know your area, you know your the journals that you read, the other studies that you've looked at, and you can find out who funded them. And that's going to be a very, very strong way for you to start looking for foundation funding. Pivot and some of the other resources are going to be an add-on to that.
Michelle, could another sort of in-between strategy be to connect with you and Paul McNamara at the Tower Foundation and just arrange a meeting with you, present their research ideas, and see who you know and sort of your group of foundations that you work with that might be appropriate?
Yeah, and that's sort of an add-on to that at any point is you're welcome to call because we can at least give you some guidance or let you know, this tool will be really helpful for you in your field, or we've seen other people at this university look in this area as far as funding. So yes, those are great options. One other piece that I found is a little bit different with some of the databases that if you haven't gone looking for foundation funding before, you may not initially think. Foundations are independent. They can choose whatever phrasing they want in terms of what they fund, what their keywords might be, what they put on their website when you're looking. So what you call teacher professional development, they might just call teacher training. And so you've got to be sort of creative sometimes in terms of what kinds of keywords you use for foundations in particular, because there is no standardization. Another thing that's important when you're using a tool like Pivot or any tool for foundations is that you are focused on getting funding for your activity, and the foundations are often looking for a solution. And I was like, okay, what's the best example I can give? And it's one that I don't understand, but I will share it with you because I think it can be helpful. You might be doing research on star polymer nanoshells. The foundation is interested in cancer therapy. you're the only one that knows that these nanoshells can be used in photothermal cancer therapy applications. So they're looking at the end, and this came up on campus when I was working with someone. I'm being told I'm looking for funding in all these areas, and I don't know what that is. And as soon as I said, what is it for? Then we were able to do some more effective searches. So also be thinking about that difference with the foundations, is that most of them are looking for a solution, and you've got to help make that jump in terms of the keywords. There are some other subtleties that may be useful, and we can talk about that as people are actually doing some of the searches, but those are sort of the big ideas that can be helpful. And again, if you contact either me or Paul McNamara at the Tower Foundation, we can help you kind of figure out how to make that connection.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay. So, what I encourage you all to do, if you have laptops, and we have a few extras here, is to stay for the workshop portion of the session. You can choose the tool that's best for you. You can complete the keyword form. I have some hard copy forms, and those of you who RSVP'd, I sent you an electronic version of that form. And I have a couple of copies of all the keywords so that you look through this to see keywords that match your research interest. You put those on the form and give it to Carmina or submit it electronically. So if that's the best strategy for you to find funding right now, is just the keyword search, that's the tool you should use in this next period of time and complete it. If you're interested in the Grants Resource Center, I have handouts for how to use that tool. And if you're interested in Pivot, I have a couple of handouts for using that. Just be aware, this is a little bit of time that we've created for you and that you've agreed to commit to. And why not just get started and see what you can find out in this next hour? If you do complete a search and come up with a couple of funders and you want some confirmation that those are appropriate funders for your research interest, you can share that list with Gilles Muller, who will then connect with Raj or Michelle or whomever the appropriate person is to find out if it's a good fit. So that's just an opportunity that we provide for you if you stay and do that work. Okay.
Amy, are you going
any
to,
questions I should ask? Yes.
Yeah, so are you going to send out these slides and
I would be happy to do that. If you have signed in and given your email address, then I will send everybody who came today a copy of the slides.
And I can add, and we will also provide the link to the recording, so
yes,
you can have access to that. And the second point I wanted to mention, during that time, as all of us are here too, if you have a specific question about what we have discussed today or anything else related to your RISCA agenda, feel free to ask us.